Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. Today, I have with me Ricardo Santos. He's one of the wonderful consultants we have at Cynozure. He's a senior solution and strategy lead, a wonderful guy. He's recently joined the business, but got loads of experience elsewhere in the industry over a nice, long, illustrious career. We're going to be talking about designing technology solutions and how to get this right. So to do that, Ricardo, welcome along to the show.
Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure to be here.
Brilliant. Well, great to have you engaging in the show in this way. So, do you want to maybe start off with introducing who you are and a bit about your background, some of the roles you've had? Let's get off on that foot.
Sure. So I have software and database engineering backgrounds, and in the last, let's say, 15 years, specializing in database solutions, so data analytics, data science, BI, data warehousing, anything around analytics and advanced analytics with data. And I have worked mainly as an independent consultant in Portugal for 15 years, and then moved on to Ireland, was a senior Microsoft BI consultant for a couple of years in Dublin, and have been in London for about 7 years now, and took a variety of roles from lead BI to product manager of a data warehouse automation platform in the cloud, as well as head of research and innovation. I have also been a CTO for a consultancy south of London, and now have joined Cynozure.
So, well, it's pleasure to hear, and I'm glad I knew all of those things that you just said as well. I've not been caught out by some surprise background that I didn't know about. You did mention Microsoft there. Is there any sort of specific technology specialisms?
Yes, I've mainly been working with Microsoft technology. So I am, for example, cloud-based. I am a specialist in the solution architecture using Azure, and mainly the core standard background of using Microsoft SQL Server-based tools to do data management.
Brilliant. And in any particular industries at all?
A variety of industries, really. So things like global retail, healthcare, public sector as well. Did a bit of everything across different types of verticals.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, it's as I say, it's great to have you on the show. It's great to obviously have you in the company. One thing actually I remember is worth mentioning, because this may come up as we chat through this topic, is you have some experience in academia and research. You mentioned it, I think, as well. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. That's right. So yes, so I started out as your standard graduate in database and software engineering, and then did a research master's in data warehousing, where I started to publish a few papers, which is not really usual in masters, but since it was there was a research component to it, I really enjoyed starting to publish research. So I have about 30 papers published in peer-reviewed conferences, which I continued then carried on during my PhD.
Amazing. Well, I will admit that I haven't yet got to them, but I'm hoping there's a library that we can catch up on. So listen, right, great to introduce you to our wonderful audience. Let's I want to talk about how sort of designing technology solutions, what people get right, what people get wrong, how people need to think about it, all that kind of thing. But just more broadly, obviously you spent a long time in data technology, but broader technology. How's the landscape kind of changed? How's it shifted? How's it got better? How's it got worse over your career? What have you seen as some of the big sort of movements?
So it's much different from about when I started, right? So about 15, 20 years ago, if you knew really well a certain stack, that would be adopted as a standard. So for example, I mentioned SQL Server stack, right? So about 15 years ago, if you would have known the SQL Server standard stack, meaning the SQL Server engine with SSIS to do data movement and transformation, the SSRS for reporting, and the SSAS for building cubes and doing analytics, that's it. That would be it for a long time. You could basically build your career on top of that. Right now, we have new tools coming up every day, right? They're coming out and they offer a variety of specialties, of niche capability, along with the embedded standard capabilities. So in terms of the landscape, it is this move to the cloud, which, taking advantage of the flexibility and cost effectiveness, has just allowed, to spawn loads of different capabilities that are available now in the cloud. So it now, the challenge in solution architecture is really wide, because depending on exactly what the requirements are from the business, then you choose the right mix of components that make up the solution, and you have a multitude of different platforms that you can use.
Yeah. So the move to cloud and the pace at which improvements, iterations, or even brand new technologies come to market, that sounds like that's sort of the biggest thing that's changed, and the number of technologies as well. It sounds like the kind of biggest thing.
It is, there. And you quickly get out of pace with it, right? Because if you don't keep up with the pace that things keep adding new capability, if you don't do regular training, if you don't follow what's actually coming out and the trends, then you can quickly just get out of the game, right? So, is
this all a good thing for? So, organize when you've got an architectural choice to make, you've got all these potential opportunities to choose from, which obviously is a good thing because it means there's some choice. But does that, that choice, makes it a challenge for people?
Well, it does. It does, exactly because of what I said. It is difficult. There is no way that you can possibly know all the different tools and technologies that are out there that can deliver the same things, or that can deliver specific things that all put together will give you the final solution, right? So
sure.
Each case is a case, and that actually leads to the way that I work when I go in to a client. For example, the main thing that concerns me is not the technology. It is what the client wants to achieve, and then that's what drives, the pick of which components and tools and technologies that you need to use to actually deliver that.
Yeah. No, but absolutely. Let's come to that. And so I think just sort of on the technology change is this overarching improvement for which technologies to choose, or does the fact that there's now so many options actually make it harder to understand what's good, what's bad? Even if you do know them all, you don't necessarily need them all in many cases. So is this a positive step for the landscape? And do you think also that will carry on? Will we keep just being more and more and more, or actually will it sort of contract at some point and start coming back together again?
Yeah, I don't think it will contract. So it is because the cloud environment especially is just prone to innovation and to just spawn different solutions coming up.
Yeah,
I think that will continue to diversify. However, like in any other industry, where at first you have loads of initial businesses coming up, startups and whatever, in the end they all tend to be grouped together and acquired and merged into bigger organizations, right? So I think things will evolve as they go, but then the big players in the market will absorb those that are more promising, or those that are growing at a higher pace. They will all be absorbed. Basically, the platforms, I believe the cloud platforms will get wider and wider.
And
the main players like AWS, Microsoft, and Google will just continue to grow.
I had a interesting Twitter chat with someone last week who was sort of questioning whether organizations like Cloudera, Hortonworks, and MapR, who were the poster child, maybe maybe 7-8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and to maybe something like 6-7 years ago, but now have lost pace to the three you just mentioned, and in some ways I was mentioning that in some ways they've shot themselves in the foot while they were kind of congratulating themselves about really transforming the data market, and this phrase big data was around then. Actually, while they were doing that, they were being out innovated with cloud first technologies, and things like MapReduce sort of all went away. So do you not think that could happen again? You've got organizations like Snowflake chipping away at some of the market.
Yeah. That could definitely happen. I mean, if we look at Microsoft, if we take the Tableau versus Microsoft Power BI as an example, for example. So Microsoft decided that they needed a solution because Tableau was just leading the self-service market, and their tool was really good. They were ranked leaders everywhere. And Microsoft, just because they have the resources, right? If they decide we're going to put together a tool that will rival with Tableau, they can. So they just spun up the Power BI initial version, which was really basic. It was
Excel on steroids, basically.
At the beginning, at the beginning, it was never going to rival Tableau at that stage. But the approach that they took by involving the users, providing feedback on what they actually wanted for the tool, and voting on the suggestions from the users to actually know which features would be more relevant, and guiding their product development based on that feedback, just led them to really quickly, in 2-3 years, they now have a tool that can rival with Tableau in many offerings and are being preferred, actually. That's what we've seen in many of our clients due to a number of variables like cost and basic features, because they now have a product that has all the basic features that users need. They don't need the users that don't need fancy functionality like Tableau offers in some aspects. Then they go for Power BI. And again, it's Microsoft, so mainly all companies have some sort of Microsoft licensing. So it's just another tick.
And we'll come on to it in a sec, actually, just talking about how organizations make that choice. And obviously sometimes that's the right choice, and sometimes other technologies are the right choice, and some other combination. But I think your point there is that the ability to innovate in a organization of that scale means that they can get to market with a product. But equally many other tools have come up, things like Looker, and Google snapped them up, and there'll be others. So
exactly.
So look, I think that kind of shift in market, one of the things that we touched on it has done there is it's helped in some ways, helped organizations to have more choice and therefore get a better technology solution to business problems, which is a really good thing. Why would we not want that? But on the other side, as mentioned, is the difficulty in knowing, keeping up with the market, but knowing which are the right tools, which are the right technologies, how do we compare them? So that all fits into kind of choosing and designing a technology estate, a technology ecosystem within an organization. How have you seen companies, I suppose, get this wrong? Like how do they approach this in a way that doesn't produce the best results? If we start there, then I want to hear about kind of what should they do, or how have you seen it work really well? But just on the kind of negatives, I guess. So where do companies get this wrong?
Yeah. So usually where I've seen many companies fail is when they put tech in front of business when they want to get to a solution. So instead of focusing on exactly what's the business value that they want to get out of what they're putting together, or that initiative or that particular project, they focus too much on technology rather than on the business. So they come to us and say, oh, we want to build this in the cloud to build this dashboard. But actually, the requirements are technical instead of being business-led. So usually we've seen most projects fail is because the users are not involved enough in the actual design of the solution. So every time that I approach a client, I usually go with a blank sheet of paper approach. There is no predefined what technology are we going to use, and what's the technology solution architecture going to look like, or what's the data model going to look like. It's actually, the first thing is listen to your client and listen to what business value should the solution be delivering. Where do they want to get to? And that should also align with the company organization, so the organization's data strategy goals and the overall organization goal as well. So all the goals should be aligned in what you're delivering, and the business value that you want to get out of it is what drives the design of the solution. From there, we flesh out the requirements. So do you need real-time capability? Do you not need real-time capability? How much data do you have to manage? What's your challenges around data quality? What's your challenges around data transformation? Data security challenges as well. So you define the requirements for each one of those domains, and then that's where you decide which components that are available to you, either cloud or on-premise or whatever, that are the best in terms of cost effectiveness, flexibility, performance, time to value, and you make the choice on which components and build out the solution architecture. What we've seen where companies fail is when you just define what the solution architecture looks like without actually knowing what the business goal is.
Right. And what's the problem with that? Why is that not a good thing to do?
The problem is
there's plenty of good tech, right? We you need a data platform. We need a data platform. So we're going. Where does that become an issue?
It becomes an issue because lots of times you end up with a solution that the user will start using and saying, well, this is not giving me what I need. So if it's not giving the end user what he or she needs, then it's not delivering the business value, right? So you risk actually building something that's really shiny technically, but in the end, it's useless because it's not delivering to the business requirement, to the business demands. So what's the point?
Yeah. And then, we've seen this, haven't we? You end up with a great technology solution that might be perfectly technology sound and work very well, but doesn't align. Doesn't align to what's needed, and therefore it becomes useless rather than brilliant. Cool. And you touched on there a little bit about the approach of how organizations can get this more right. I think you sort of talk about starting with the business outcome, business objective, but is there kind of like a broad set of sort of topics or areas that people should look at? Because obviously there's the business requirement itself. We want to try and achieve something, and you touched on there I guess sort of functional requirements like security, but is there kind of like a broader set of things that we need to think about when we're starting out designing a new analytics solution?
So the main thing is as I mentioned, you have to sit down with the business users and actually review what they use today to actually manage the business or whatever you need the business for, the data for, sorry. So basically, what usually I do is review what are they using for insights? Are they using like Excel to get out data from somewhere to produce, whatever charts they need that will support their decision making and know how the business is going? For example, that's quite common, and you need to sit down with them to understand exactly what they need. What they have today, is it good enough?
Yeah.
What can be improved? And what would be their kind of dream scenario in a world of their dreams? What would be the ideal output that would help them do their job better?
Yeah.
And then you look at the data and technology and see how you can deliver that to them. That's usually the approach.
Cool. And then I guess you've got the stage there of then choosing which technology to use. How much do you sort of buy into or recommend continuing to involve the people who are ultimately going to use the technology in the decision of technology? There's often this debate, well, leave IT to choose the technology or leave the business to choose it, but either way they're sort of separated. What have you seen work best there?
It depends on the case. So when you want to align the technology, you need to align it to a series of variables. One is exactly which components do the job best in terms of what the business wants to achieve.
Yeah.
But there's also the situation where, well, if you're a Microsoft house, that's your developers in-house are Microsoft, you shouldn't be advising other cloud platform solutions, right? Unless there is a really good reason for them to shift, but that usually involves a lot of effort, cost, resources, etc., right? So you have to align to their internal knowledge and skill set as well. So that's what you need to do, besides choosing the right mix of available components that are out there.
Mm.
And then there's the cost effectiveness as well, right? Depending on what you want to achieve. That's usually a key decision point, basically, to adapt to the actual use cases. So you should be doing the design, focusing on the set of use cases that you want to achieve.
Yeah, and because use cases are an interesting one, because of course there's use cases today, and then there's sort of use cases down the line. Is this a case of sort of almost thinking and planning wide and then executing narrow, or designing wide and executing narrow, or do we need to design a solution and implement a solution that can sort of cater for all use cases? Is there a sort of I suppose an approach question? Do we start small and scale it? Do we go, we know we're going to need to do all these things in the future, so let's set them up now? What's your sort of recommended way of thinking that through?
Yeah, that's an excellent one. That is a question that we get quite often. So you should have an approach that doesn't try to build full-fledged the whole solution at once. You should divide it by the use cases. You should prioritize those use cases. The solution architecture that underpins what you're going to put together is supposed to be a foundational solution architecture that lands and expands. So you should be focusing small. You should be focusing on probably use cases that deliver quick time to value, to do some quick wins, get some quick wins, get quick wins with delivering value in a short period of time to start out. The solution architecture that's behind it should be a foundation for the long-term vision, encompassing all the use cases that you can define.
Yeah.
So you land and expand. So you start small,
something
you build your initial,
scale.
The solutions for the initial use cases, and then you keep expanding. And that ties nicely with your traditional enterprise data analytics solutions. So for example, if you follow the traditional Kimball data warehouse methodology with the enterprise data model, then you would build a foundation of your data model that would be expandable, right? So you don't build from scratch every time that you start a new use case. You will build the common dimensions, facts, the common data objects that then you keep adding throughout time.
So both from a technology perspective, so which tools to implement, which is the software, but then there's the application that you build. So it sounds like you're saying both the approach to kind of implementing and switching on tools, and maybe that's Microsoft or whatever else, but the components within that, but then also the approach to building the data warehouse or the application that you build with those technologies. Both of those are kind of start small, but know where you're going, so that you can kind of scale towards where you're going, but not have to build all up front before you can do anything.
Yeah, exactly. So they are a common foundation that you don't throw away or need to build a completely new thing every time that you keep adding solutions for different use cases.
Yeah. What are some of the key kind of roles that organizations need in order to do this? So, there's a number of different skills that go through my head when you're talking through all of this stuff. You're talking about collecting and analyzing requirements. We're talking about understanding the technology landscape. We're talking about designing which technology tools we need. We're talking about designing data warehouses, talking about engaging with the business. We're talking about coming up with a roadmap. There's all these kind of like different capabilities and skills needed. So there's some sort of 2 or 3 or more, I don't know, key roles that are needed in this space, or at least sort of a couple of linchpin roles that really help you to define the plan and execute the plan.
Yes, I like to look at it as a set of skill sets, which usually tend to be different roles than when then you look for people to fill them in.
Mm.
Basically, you need someone to understand the business. So you need someone that has the typical knowledge and skills of a business analyst or a data analyst. You would need someone to design the solution, choose the right mix of components, technology, architecture, tools, technologies, platforms. So you would need a solution architect to design what that infrastructure foundation should look like to deliver the value with the data.
Yep.
And then you would need a data modeler to do your data modeling, which can be found or not typically in data engineers. And then you would have your data engineers to do the hands-on build of the solution in the background. Potentially, you would also have people to actually build your dashboards, inside outputs, your reports, your dashboards, your analytics, which typically tend to be a BI developer or an analytics developer, knowing tools like Tableau or Power BI. Because they tend to be different from data engineers, as they are more business focused and visualization of data rather than actually building the technical back end of data management. Also, if you're in a state where you want to go a step beyond what is traditional business intelligence or data analytics, you would potentially hire a data scientist to also deliver advanced analytics like forecasting and clustering, predictive models, etc.
Yeah. Just a thought that sort of flowed through my mind there as you were talking about different roles, and you mentioned about the modeling before. One thing we haven't talked about is kind of the different modeling techniques. So you mentioned Kimball, sort of Kimball and Inman were the key approaches of a number of years back. There's other things now on, new kids on the block with data vaults, data mesh. What's your view on those? Do those traditional data modeling approaches like Kimball that were designed in a time when databases weren't as scalable as they are, they were more expensive, they weren't as fast, so we needed to be really efficient with how we model. How's that changed, and do you think those traditional ones like Kimball still have a place?
To be honest, I definitely think the traditional ones like Kimball, they are the standard, because I haven't seen, even with Data Vault and Data Mesh, I haven't seen a better way of organizing structured data than with the traditional, especially Kimball methodology. That is still the standard, although there are specific applications where Data Mesh and Data Vault could particularly be used. There's also now the data lake approach, which was positioned in a wrong way in the past when it came about. Where vendors were selling the idea that a data lake will solve all your data problems. Just get rid of your data warehouses and consume everything directly from the data lake. Just chuck everything into the data lake and then do analytics on top with a tool that can plug in directly to files. Now that proved to be a very big misconception. Lots of companies spent lots of money and didn't really get anywhere, because the data lake becomes a data swamp and a mess for people to find the data that they need. It's not structured. You just chuck the data in and then you worry about structuring it later on. It's not really functional. It's not really practical. So it ended up not being feasible, that idea that you would just solve everything with the data lake. Now, besides the structured data, so Kimball is really good when you know upfront exactly what the requirements from the business are and what you're expecting to get in the end. And it's the best way for you to structure data for analytics if you know exactly what data you need. The issue comes with, for example, data science kind of approaches where you don't need a priori when you actually build upfront and put the data in. You don't really know what you're going to need until you have a question that you need to answer. So the data lake approach with putting things into a data lake and then having tools that can look up the data and mash it together really easily and quickly in a self-service way, that does offer today something really useful for those types of initiatives.
Yeah. Which I guess at some point, once they've been modeled and they become a standard metric that needs to be reported on, then your
you can embed
ways
it
of
back.
modeling it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Great. Okay. Well, no, it's good to just kick the modeling one around, because I know it's a question that comes up quite a lot. So looking forward, do you think, is there any kind of big changes on the horizon to all of this? Is it going to, we've talked about a few things, but is it going to be more of the same? Is it going to be just continued iteration of technology, or are there going to be some brand new, things that are going to change the way we do this? What's your view on sort of what comes next in the next sort of, I don't know, three to 5 years?
I think definitely in the immediate is everyone that is not in the cloud yet will be in the cloud. That's definitely, and transitioning towards traditional using the cloud just as infrastructure, to service-based, pure service-based, which there aren't that many companies yet that are fully service-based. That will be potentially the future. I think eventually nobody will have data locally on their computer anymore. Computers will only be like an interface to get up into the cloud to have everything. The processing, the main processing, the storage, everything will be, even the operating system potentially will be in the cloud. Your local machine will just be kind of a
dumb terminal. We're going back to client server, are we?
I believe we are. I don't think our local machines will be as they are today.
Yeah. Well, I can see that the pace of change in technology means that you're look how quickly someone like Apple needs to bring out a new Mac, upgrading hardware, upgrading software, so yes, I can see that a direction of travel. Well, look, brilliant, Ricardo. Appreciate you coming onto the show and talking through how we design, and we need to think about designing technology solutions and how organizations can get that right. So thanks very much for coming on the show and sharing some of your wise words, sir.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Cheers. Thanks, Jason.
No worries at all. And thanks everyone for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll catch you again soon.